Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 56th Chicago International Film Festival. My name is Mimi Plochet, and I'm Artistic Director of the festival. And it is my great pleasure to be here to be able to introduce, with Regina King's directorial debut, One Night in Miami, we have Kemp Powers, playwright, director, and screenwriter of One Night in Miami. Kemp, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Great. And it's also my pleasure to introduce one of my favorite people and moderators, Regina Taylor. She is not only an award-winning playwright, director, and actress, but also chair of our Black Perspectives Committee. I'm so looking forward to the conversation between the two of you. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kemp Powers, it's so great to see you.
It's good to see you again.
And I have to say, again, I love this film. Now, One Night in Miami is your first feature film.
Yes.
And you also have on board Regina King, Oscar-winning actress, and this is also her first feature film. You've gotten great notices for it, and I'd like to know, has this changed your life?
Honestly, it's too early to say if it's changed. I've been pretty busy. You know how this business goes. It's like by the time your film comes out, you're already kind of working on the next thing. So, yeah. Between being busy working on new projects and honestly with COVID,
yes,
not being able to actually be there for anything, it all feels pretty surreal. Like to be perfectly honest, all these film festivals, I've attended them all from this room in my house. This is as close as I've gotten to anyone involving the film since it's come out. But it has been really great to see the largely positive reaction that audiences have had. That's really made me happy. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest.
It is your first time out as a feature film. You started this as a play, and before that, you were a journalist. What was the segue from becoming a playwright from being a journalist?
Yeah, I was a journalist for 17 years, and to be honest, I thought that I was going to live a full life and die being a journalist. I always loved theater because I'm from New York originally, so you grow up going to the public, you grow up going to Broadway when you can. So that's always been the backdrop, the background. I tell people that the background music of my childhood is either theater or hip hop and dance hall reggae. Like those are the three things that are kind of ever present in my upbringing. But I never really thought that I'd be doing that for a living. I actually lived in Chicago for several years. When I worked at Forbes magazine, I worked right there in the Loop. So I honestly never thought that I would be writing creatively, but as we all know, journalism kind of started contracting about 10, 15 years ago. And there's no nice way to put it, I was simply one of those casualties. I was one of those mid-career journalists who kind of got forced to look for another career. And it just so happens that my longtime hobby, the thing that I've been doing on nights and weekends for most of my adult life, which was writing fiction, it started off, writing comic books, writing essays and short stories, then writing short plays. I think the timing just lined up perfectly. I joined a very small theater company here in Los Angeles. The irony of a New Yorker coming to Los Angeles to start his playwriting career is not lost on me, by the way. But it was a very tiny equity waiver company, which I believe in Chicago, they're called like storefront theaters.
Right.
It's not, it's 99 seats or less. So you do very, very super micro budget productions. And
what's the name of the theater?
Rogue Machine.
Yes,
Rogue Machine Theater. Yeah, so I came on board in the theater company doing like storytelling at first, and then I started writing 24-hour plays. For those unfamiliar with it, you basically come in, you get given a random prompt, and you go home and write overnight. And the next morning you come in with like a short 15-minute play that is performed. So that was where I really started honing my writing.
What was your first piece that you wrote?
Honestly, I don't my first play was One Night in Miami.
Yes, I know. Yes. Where did you start out with these shorter pieces?
At Rogue Machine. Yeah.
What were they about?
Um, I honestly don't even remember what the subject of the first one was, because it was very much like almost like freestyle rap, where they say, okay, you have to use this prop. At some point, someone has to kiss and someone has to say this line. And then you get a random list of actors. You go home and you formulate very quickly a plot using the props they give you and the prompts that they've given you for those actors. And I wrote so many of those, I honestly don't even remember what half of them were about. But it was more like a creative exercise.
Right.
Right. And it was wonderful because, again, I've always been a fan of theater and a fan of plays, but for some reason, I think it's because I wasn't formally trained. I never really saw myself as being capable of writing that way. And I think it's just, I was such a huge fan of like August Wilson plays and, you know, Arthur Miller and Sam Shepard. And there is a poetry to great writing that I just felt like I didn't necessarily have the ability to do. And so it was a great, at doing those exercises, I think really helped my confidence. It made me feel that my voice had enough merit that I should try to, tell stories that were important to me too.
Yes. So your first piece is One Night in Miami as the first production. You find that piece that you want to write, which is not a prompt, but is from the heart. Where did the idea come from?
Initially, well, it was a real night. The February 25th, 1964, the night that Cassius Clay beat Sonny Liston, really did happen. He did go back to Malcolm X's motel room at the Hampton House and hang out with Sam Cooke and Jim Brown. And the next morning is when he announced that he was in the Nation of Islam. When I first read about this night, my intention was to write a book about their friendship because I was still a journalist. So that was something I'd been researching for years with the intention of writing a nonfiction book about the friendship between Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown. And again, when my journalism career ended, and it was like, well, people said that I had a flair for writing plays, and my artistic director asked me if I had any ideas for a full-length play. That was the first thing that came to mind. I said, well, there was this incredible night. It felt like it was potentially theatrical. The idea of starting the play when they enter the room, having it be real time for 90 minutes, and then ending the play when they leave the room, it felt naturally theatrical. And it also allowed me to play with fiction about the one time that I couldn't find much information in all my research, which is like what they said, what they discussed when they were in the room. So being freed of the reality, but also being empowered by knowing everything that happened to them before that night and after that night, I felt like I had the great groundwork to tell a really interesting story.
So starting from your imagination, these four men in this room, what were the first words you set down?
I think the first words were from Malcolm, and they were directed at Sam Cooke. And it was Malcolm at one point saying, I am so tired of you so-called Negroes basically justifying doing things negative to the Black community with the promise that you'll make it up to them later. That was like the first thing. And it came from a real conversation that I'd had with a friend of mine about, believe it or not, Lincoln Perry, known as Step and Fetch It. Because we were having a discussion and he brought up the fact that Step and Fetch It Lincoln Perry was like one of the first Black millionaires. And I countered, yeah, but he became a millionaire by perpetrating images of Black people that negatively impacted us for generations. So we had this kind of vigorous debate about the symbolism of him being a millionaire and what it took for him to make those millions. And could he ever, and that conversation was the foundation of the worldview of Malcolm in the play. So that was one of the first lines that I actually wrote. It was a debate between Malcolm and Sam, and that was one of the first lines.
Well, it is very much a debate. People on different sides of the issue of being an entertainer, and the three men are entertainers. Malcolm X is the activist, social activist, acting on them and questioning if you have this platform, what do you want to do with it as an African American, as an African American man? Do you feel some responsibility? Is that something that you have grappled with as a writer?
All the time, and I still grapple with it today. I mean, ultimately, I tell people what the play and what this film is about is what social responsibility, if any, does the Black artist have? That's what this is ultimately about. And it's a question that, I mean, I have my belief. I believe we can never separate our Blackness from our artistry. That's just, a lot of people say, I don't want to be seen as a Black this or a Black that. And I get that intellectually, but I also don't see us ever being perceived as not Black and that thing that we do. So for me, the central debate in the film is honestly an argument going on in my own psyche before every job that I do or don't take, because I'm sure I don't have to explain to you, you've been in this, you're way more experienced in this business than I am, the nature of the opportunities that'll come your way and how often those opportunities, it's like a question about paying your rent and compromising your soul. And that happens a lot when you're an artist of color. And the things the things we will do to validate the decisions we make for whatever reason. So yes, I still grapple with it. I feel lucky though, in that I feel like my being honest about my politics and how I feel about the subject, we're at a time right now where those opinions are, I think, way more accepted. And it's possible to actually tell those stories with those opinions in a way that we couldn't even 10 years ago.
Yes, I was thinking, could this film have been done on the scale 5 years ago?
I don't think so. To be perfectly honest, one of the main reasons I decided to adapt it into a film was how difficult it was to find people to produce the play. And in many cases, the play was rejected outright by theaters who said that it would offend their subscriber base, or I'm paraphrasing, but they basically implied that their subscribers would not connect to the material. But you read between the lines.
It seems like it would be more difficult to turn it into a film. What was the road that
I think I might disagree. I think that Hollywood, as many challenges as there are in Hollywood, I think theater, live theater, regional theater, those challenges feel even more acute. It feels like there's even more gatekeepers. It feels like it's even harder, that there's fewer slots, there's fewer opportunities for us to have our work fully realized. I'm not talking about workshopping, because we'll all be workshopped to death. There's so many grants that we could all spend our whole theater careers, so to speak, just going from workshop to workshop to workshop and never getting on the main stage. And even then, within the theater ecosystem, there is the main versus the secondary stage. And often artists of color get put in the smaller black box theater. So, for those who don't know, playwrights get paid royalties. So being in a house that's 150 versus 900 seats,
right,
is a big difference in how much you can actually get paid. I actually think that, for me at least, I think theater is harder to get one's work produced. And I don't know, I'm very curious what the result of this pandemic and theater being shut down for so long, what it's going to be, if that's going to be the thing that kind of forces some change. I know a lot of theater artists have been pretty vocal about a lot of these things and way more articulate than I could ever be about it. But making a film is hard. But, ultimately, if you have the money, you can get your movie made. In theater, it's not that simple.
It was that once it was done at Rogue Machine, you had some people who expressed interest in it from there.
Yes.
Adapted into a film. Yes.
Basically, the producers of the film saw the first production at Rogue Machine. I mean, I had two things happen. First, Kwame Kwei-Armah, who was at the time the artistic director of Baltimore Center Stage, he flew out and saw it in LA.
Yes.
And Kwame decided he wanted to bring it to Baltimore. So, I mean, you talk about an artistic director of color taking a huge leap and picking this production out of obscurity and saying, I'm going to put this on the main stage at Baltimore Center Stage. That was huge. And at the same time that Kwame was expressing interest in helping the play get a life, Keith Calder and Jess Calder, two indie producers, they saw the play and said, we would love to help try to adapt this into a film. Now, at the time, I was like, I'm not interested in a film at all. I really want to see this play have a life. So the Abco Records, Jody Klein, who they own the rights to the Sam Cooke music, came on board very early on as a producer, and they partnered with Kwame in the Baltimore production, which did incredibly well. I think it was like record-breaking.
Yes.
And Kwame actually then directed the play at the Dunbar Warehouse in London.
Yes.
It was Kwame's return to the London stage, and that production, which Abco also helped produce, got nominated for the Olivier Award. But out of that all, I gotta say, like, there were feelings of disappointment that the play didn't have a longer life. It didn't transfer to the West End. It's still never been produced in New York. No theaters, none of the major theaters in New York were interested in it. And so that was when, Keith and Jess, to their credit, they came to me every year saying, do you want to adapt it? Do you want to adapt it? Do you want to adapt it? It finally got to the point where we had some great productions. We had a great production in Denver. That's where I met you, I believe. Right. Denver Center did a wonderful production. We had like 5 or 6. We had a production in Johannesburg, but the play was pretty much dying on the vine. We couldn't find, it had stalled. So I figured my initial goal was I wanted to reach an audience with this story, and I decided to adapt it into a screenplay. Almost, I don't want to say I was forced to, but my desire to do so increased as I saw the play wasn't getting traction.
Right. Well, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad it's being shown now. It really strikes a chord in this moment in time, what we're going through in terms of this country and race. What you have are these 4 very iconic, legendary men, famous, who are bonded by the color of their skin, by their merits, that we see their flaws, that we see their challenges, and that we see even with their fame, even with their money, they are still shadowed by the stigma of race in this country. It's striking a chord. I think, people are drawn to this film. I think it's really necessary watching at this moment in time.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to hear that. I mean, I think that this moment we're going through, coincidentally enough, did start back when the first production of the play. I remember we were about halfway through the production when the Trayvon Martin verdict came in, and George Zimmerman was acquitted for Trayvon Martin's murder. And it struck the cast. Like we ended up doing a Q&A after that production because everyone was pretty distraught, and we had a very charged performance of the play. And the original director, Carl Cofield, I remember him saying, he's like, we're going into like a new civil rights era right now. Yeah. And when he said that in interviews, you could see that people were like, well, that's hyperbole. And it's like, no, it's not. And since then, the increase, not in these events happening, but them being recorded and there being travesties of justice with every single one, just increased and increased and increased. So it feels like this moment we're in, we've been in this moment for like 6-7 years now. And I just think we're reaching a boiling point with all of it. So I know that the film might feel reactionary, but my goal, I wish the film and the play would be seen as a time capsule, like a different time, but it's not meant to be as anachronistic as it might feel, because I very much tried to stay in these guys' world where they were. But the reality is, I would assume a lot of artists, athletes of color are, unfortunately, despite having more money, still struggling with these same questions decades and decades later.
Right. We are all facing those same questions.
Yeah.
And challenges in this moment in time. It's good that we know something of our history to try and figure out how we navigate from here, it is that you show them not only as icons, but as men.
Yeah,
Not
that was
the face of it, it's important to you to show their personal sides.
that was a big motivator for me. I mean, the whole idea was you get to be a fly on the wall for a conversation you've got no business listening in on. And that might mean, I think, different things for a Black and a white audience. I should say a Black audience and everyone else. For the Black audience, the key thing was to show vulnerability.
Yes.
For me, these guys are such icons, and sometimes with iconography, it can make people seem not human, and it can make the things that they do, the things that they did, seem impossible to do. And I was really struck by how young they all were on this night. The fact that when I wrote the first draft of this play, I was older than all of them on that night. The Cassius Clay was 22.
Yes.
Jim Brown was about to retire from the NFL and was 28. Sam Cooke, who would be dead of just a few months after that night, was just 30. And that Malcolm X was the elder statesman at 39.
Right.
So
he was killed shortly after as well.
Exactly. Both him and Sam less than a year.
Right.
And that really struck me because all these movements, it's important to remind people that they're usually youth movements, you know? And I think there's unfortunately this idea of like, we have to be able to trust young people to make the right decisions. And I wanted to, when I wrote the play, I wanted to remind people that these were young men. I wanted to show them being young men in the way that young men behave, which is not the public, but it's the private when you let your hair down and you relax with your boys, basically.
Right. Ali, Cassius Clay at that time, is almost childlike. He's kind of like the baby brother of the group. You see,
that's exactly
Jim Brown. Yes. See, Jim Brown, you know, all his toughness comes across privately as very nurturing, supporting of the people in the group, his buddies. And then you have this kind of nervous edginess to Sam Cooke, who sings these love songs in the public eye. And I really love the scene where Malcolm X goes outside for a moment. He makes the phone call to his wife and to his child. That was very moving.
Oh, so, you know, that was, that came from Regina actually had a wonderful conversation with Ambassador Shabazz, Atala Shabazz.
That's his oldest daughter.
Yes, and she told him that story. She told Regina that story. She said that my father would call and he would hide things around the house and then call and have us do these games where we would uncover letters that he'd hidden for us. And when Regina told me, I said, oh man, am I thinking this? Are you thinking the same thing? I'm thinking like, we have to get this into the film. So that's something that was not in the play that just came from Regina's outreach to a lot of the families of a lot of these men. And I thought that was like, when she recounted it to me, I was very moved. Just seeing him being a loving father and kind of, despite all the pressures going on around him, not letting that infect or come into the world of his relationship with his daughter. And I'm really happy to hear that you liked it.
Oh, I loved it. I think coming back to your wanting to show these very multifaceted men beyond the public face, you imagined them as they were 1964 and these circumstances that strikes right here and now. Where did you begin with the casting?
Well, the casting process, you know, Regina actually auditioned. I'm trying to think.
I have to go back because Regina King did a magnificent job. Now, you chose a fierce African-American woman to direct this piece that has so much testosterone.
Yeah.
What was it about her vision that made you say, I have to have her direct my piece?
From our first I remember having our first conversation. She was still shooting Watchmen. So we had a Skype call Skype video call. She was in Atlanta, I was in Los Angeles. And just the fact that she connected to the material in like a visceral kind of way, not just the film. She read the screenplay, then quickly got a copy of the play script and wanted to read them both. And the way in which she connected with the material and the specific things that she tuned in on made me realize that like it is so testosterone filled. And as a Black woman, she's going to cover the blind spots that I have as a man, you know? And I don't know. I just felt like her energy was so positive and supportive. And the reason the play succeeds when it does is the performances that are pulled out of the actors. And I really felt like she would, and everyone did, that she was the ultimate actor's director. You know, she's got going almost 4 decades of experience.
Exactly.
And that if she couldn't pull the very specific performances out of these actors, that no one could, that really no one could. And she was invested in each of the characters almost like on a very personal level. She said in the very beginning, it's like my father's, my brother's, like my son. You know, she's very close to her son. Like she was always bouncing things off of her son, like, check this out, Ian, what do you think? And the relationship she has with the men in her life, it was very evident that was like helping this connect to her. So I feel like, man, talk about feeling lucky, because all I said in the beginning was that I think that we should have, as I put it, a first time or a new director direct the film. That was my suggestion. And it never occurred to me Regina King, because at the time I didn't know that she was looking for a feature to direct. So
yes. Directed a lot of
television.
Yes.
Yeah.
TV series. Yes.
But before I met her, I didn't know anything about like what she was looking to do. But my thing was let's just get a new director. But it was great with Regina because she was both a new director, but also had like, was not a, you know what I mean? Like totally not a new,
right.
She directed like she's been on set for so many decades that it was very set. Natural.
And then as it to bottom. Yes, and you do see a very sure hand with the directing in this piece, guiding these really amazing actors into a cohesive ensemble, and that's really important. Going back then to the actors, finding each and every one who's right to play these people that we think we're familiar with. There's an expectation that we know them, so how do you transcend that to open up what we think we know about them?
Yeah, I mean, the casting of it was fascinating. Again, I feel like the universe gave us the right people for each part, the right person for each part, because you know how movies are. People come in, they drop out. There's lots of like people who come and go throughout the process, but ultimately all 4 of the leads ended up auditioning in one way or another for Regina. I believe the first of the 4 who like officially signed on was Aldis Hodge. And I was a tremendous fan of Aldis Hodge. Like
Ali.
What's that?
To play Ali.
No, to play Jim Brown.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Brown. Yes. I've seen him in a lot of performances, and I thought he was really excellent.
Yeah, he's just like a solid human being and such a professional, and definitely has that thing of like being an actor like made for movies, and just disappears into his various roles. So Aldis was the I believe the first of the 4 to sign on, and then I believe it was Eli, who played Cassius, and we didn't know who Eli was. That was literally, he came in and auditioned and just blew us all away. Like we were just like, who is this guy? He actually came in the first time in character. So he was in character as Cassius Clay for the audition. As he was preparing, he was having a conversation with us as though he were Cassius Clay. So he immediately rose. I mean, there were other people who auditioned, but he immediately rose to one of our favorites. It's a smaller part, but Christian Magby, who plays Brother Jamal,
Yes.
He came in and auditioned for Cassius as well. And we were kind of taken aback at first because he like doesn't physically is so different. And he like on his own dime flew from New York to audition. And we were laughing at his performance because I mean, it was so audacious that I looked at Regina and I was like, couldn't he be Brother Jamal? So we actually stopped him before he left, gave him the sides for Jamal. He took like 20 minutes, came back in and knocked out that audition and got the Brother Jamal, which I think is an important story because, you know, Regina loves giving opportunities to new voices as well. Yes. That was another thing. This wasn't for her about just calling her famous friends and asking them all to be in her movie. She wanted to make sure that she gave opportunity to new voices. We were talking a lot about movies like Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders, where, you know, that was a big movie for me as a little kid. And everyone in that movie ended up being like a star, but you could see their star quality in that. I love this idea of like a rising tide lifts all ships. So, you know, we were all big believers in this being a great opportunity for new voices. I believe after that, Leslie came on board. And again, Leslie Odom Jr., forget it. Like he is, you talk about someone just like you couldn't get a better Sam Cooke as far as I'm concerned, in terms of both the performance, the believability of the performance, and the voice.
Yes.
Like forget it.
I was reading that somewhere they were playing his song and people were thinking that was Sam Cooke, but that was him singing.
Wait till you hear the soundtrack and hear Leslie singing not just A Change Is Gonna Come, but like Good Times and several Sam Cooke songs. You will, yes, on first listen, you will be confused and think it's actually Sam Cooke. So he channeled Sam in a way that really was kind of a marvel to behold. And then the last of the four, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something? And the last of the four was Kingsley Ben-Adir, who came on board, honestly, just a few weeks before we started shooting. We still did not have our Malcolm X. And Kingsley came in and auditioned. And once again, he was this actor I wasn't very familiar with. I had met him years ago because he had been cast in another film that one of the producers was doing that it didn't come to fruition. And once again, here was this guy who was studious and prepared and just like did this performance of Malcolm that was like, how is he channeling this man the way he is? And I mean channeling, because you would say like cut and he was like a different person. So, you know, it came down to 2 or 3 actors, but Kingsley, I think, just he just stood out as such. He captured the vulnerability of Malcolm that we really needed. So we had our 4 then. And honestly, Regina, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I mean, these guys had to pretty much show up on set and build a rapport with one another with like no rehearsal, like just the first rehearsal we did, I think they did a table read, but then like other than rehearsing quickly before each scene, these guys had to build their rapport on the fly with one another. So
how many days did you have to shoot?
What's that?
How many days did you have to shoot?
It was a 7-week shoot.
Wow.
That was principal photography in New Orleans.
Yes.
And then we wrapped principal photography in New Orleans about a week before the pandemic shut everything down. We had 2 pickup days we were supposed to shoot, and we had to postpone those for a few months, and we finished the film. We did those pickup days in Long Beach and Manhattan Beach, those 2 days. What was it? Like just a few months ago, like right before we finished the movie. So, but it was mostly done in New Orleans. We were like 90% done. And it was an intense shoot. Like there was not a lot of time for all the running around we had to do.
What was the budget?
You have to ask the producers what the exact budget is. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I read it was something like 16 million, somewhere around about.
I didn't write the checks, so I can't say I cannot say with certainty what the budget is.
I think it's a beautiful, beautiful film.
Thank you.
From top to bottom. You write about real people. Do you feel a different responsibility in writing about fictional people as opposed to real people?
I absolutely do. Look, I mean, you don't want to fall into just like endless praise of a person, but you want to be respectful to who that person was.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be fair of me to have, say, you know, Malcolm X, I don't know, like cursing at people. Like it's not fair to characterize the person in a way that is complete fiction. So even though it's a fictionalized scenario, well, a fictionalized discussion, the scenario is true. I believe I have a responsibility to represent each of those men as close to as I know that they were supposed to be as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that goes down to, you know, some of their very, very specific behaviors. So yeah, I definitely feel a responsibility in that regard.
Right now, it seems like it's booming. New Black films made by Black producers, writers. It reminds me something, can we compare it with the 70s Harlem Renaissance when things were burgeoning? Do you think that this will continue? Do you think that this is a blip, that the window of opportunity will close quickly, or is this really a deep-seated change that we're experiencing right now?
I'm glad you noticed that, because I've been having these same conversations with a few friends of mine. Like a week ago, I was having that conversation with Matt Cherry. I was like, I think we're in the new Black Renaissance right now. Like another friend of mine, Reynaldo Marcus Green, he's directing the Will Smith film, King Richard. Like, I just realized that a lot of my friends and people I know are also all doing their projects at the same time, and it feels like a renaissance. And you're right in that we've had these renaissances in the past, and the door slammed shut. I choose to be optimistic, and I do believe this is different, because in the past, it's always about just doing the art. But I think that in this instance, there are a lot of people. You think about folks like Ava DuVernay and Lena Waithe. There are a lot of people who are as much about the control and management side and the producerial side, yes, and the decision-making side as there are on the artistic side.
Right.
And you're seeing it not just in household names, but in Black executives, you know,
right,
at places like Disney and Marvel, who are in positions of power.
That's different.
Very different. And that's what gives me a lot of hope that this is not going to be a blip.
Hmm. Hmm. Why now, though? It seems that, especially in this moment in time, why is it that so many avenues are opening when so many things are shutting down?
I think maybe I have my own theory. I think perhaps maybe artists realize they've got nothing to lose just being honest and being their honest selves. Like I jokingly said to a friend, what is all this playing by the rules gotten us after 8 years of the Obamas and the work they did? The thanks that we get is our current situation. So it's like, I think there's a lot of artists who just kind of have this, rightfully so, well, F it. I'm just going to be my honest self and tell this honest story. And whether you like it or don't, I'm still going to do it. And I also think that there is, I don't know, like there's a multi-generational component to it that I also really, really like. Like I'm 46 years old. I'm not even like the younger generation. You know, there are like younger people in their 20s kind of doing their thing. There are people, you know, on the generation above me who I look up to, of course, folks like yourself, who are like, to lead the way. But I feel like we're all kind of here at the same time, and we're all kind of still having to maneuver in this system. And I think there's wonderful opportunities for us all multi-generationally to work together. You know, I had the great joy of writing and co-directing the Disney Pixar film Soul. And it was just really great to have a cast that included folks like Felicia Rashad, you know, Angela Bassett, Jamie Foxx, and then Daveed Diggs and Questlove. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's this
Yes.
That would have been like a dream that I couldn't have imagined, to bring together like a multi-generational Black cast
Right.
for a
So
Disney animated feature.
that's your next piece.
Yes, it comes out. It's actually coming out in Christmas on Disney Plus. So,
What's it about?
oh, it's about a jazz musician, an aspiring jazz musician named Joe Gardner, who on the day that he gets his big break, has an accident and almost dies. And but because he feels like life has cheated him, he refuses to go on to the great beyond, and instead decides to fight his way back to his body with the help of an unborn soul who does not want to go to Earth because she doesn't see life as being worth living. So you have a soul who doesn't want to die stuck with a soul who doesn't want to live. And it's firmly rooted in the world of like jazz and Black New York. I mean, like the amount I was able to lean into all the culturally specific things in a way that I would have never in a million years believed that a Pixar animated feature would allow me to do. And again, with the cast to execute it. So for me, it's just been like bounty on top of bounty, both of these movies. Just you're seeing this endless flow of talent, and just knowing like, oh my God, we could make any kind of movie we want right now if we have the wherewithal to do it. And it's not the only one. You know, you have people out there like Ryan Coogler and Ryan Coogler. You got just people, we're like flipping pancakes with our movies right now. It's kind of, isn't it great? I love it. Like,
wonderful.
And then it's not talking about television where it's like, there's so many shows, I can't keep up with them all. So I really, really hope that this isn't a blip, because people are showing some real talent and promise and finding audiences in a way that just like, I don't know. I have to be optimistic about that.
Well, certainly you are. I'm looking forward to your next projects. And as for this movie, it's incredible. I think everybody should see this. Thank you.
That means so much coming from you. Thank you, Regina.